Your zoomies? Yeah.
Is that when what you call me running around?
Yeah, yeah. Like a chihuahua that gets excited when the doorbell rings.
Yeah, it's I always need to be like, talking isn't enough to keep my ADHD in check.
Mm-hmm.
I
Or they can be the same way. It was just really funny to see ADHD happening live in real time.
yep. That's exactly what it is.
You were like, we're looking for solutions, and I was like, look for the five ends, Nino.
I what I saw yesterday was so bad.
Okay, so what happened?
Um, I don't know if this is a one-off scenario, but it's hard for me to believe it's a one-off scenario because I know that I've been told that this sort of things happen. There's a guy named Finley, right? He's like,
yeah, ADMC runs a mechanic shop.
exactly.
Yeah.
And there was like a call over radio, and Maxwell was like first on scene. I was in the back. Now I later find out that someone must have seen it with like a photograph, right? But
That
the
you were in the
way,
back?
I'm sorry.
That you were in the back?
Yeah, I was in the back of the cruiser.
Okay, okay.
And so when they arrived, Finley was like fixing his car and he had a gun out. And what went from there is like Maxwell's there. Now 5 other police cars have already arrived, and those are the ones that I can see.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone the cops that I didn't see, right?
Yeah. Was this PD or BCSO?
BCSO mostly.
Okay.
And immediately I'm like, oh, see, this is why we need to put fucking cop limits, right? I did not expect what I saw next, right? Is that this many cops all training their guns on Finley. He turns around, says a couple words, and he puts his gun away. Yet they're all pointing their guns there. And this continues
After
on
he put his
until...
away?
Yes. And it continues on until now ADMC is now telling him to get off their block, and they're starting to see guns out. It all turns out that it may have been some weed sale down there. And it abrupted into a shootout. Now, did one of them point the gun at the cop? Did the cop point the gun back? Like, what? That, to me, is outside of the important factor, right? If a criminal points a gun at a cop in a situation like that, the cop's going to shoot him. Whatever.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't have gotten to that even to begin with, right? It should have not have even gotten to who's pointing the gun at who. And the only thing I could get is that these fucking people do not understand why they're a cop to begin with, right?
Did he ever raise his gun, or was it simply in his
No,
hand?
it was in his. It was on the side while he was repairing the car. And he put it down and faced the cops. No one even fucking approached him.
I mean, if cops want to have their guns aimed while a weapon is out, I mean, depending on the situation, you know, it's maybe iffy, but like, once he puts it away, they should at least be lowering theirs. Like,
Yes. Doing some sort of like semblance of like like anything. Have one officer approach. Some of them put their guns down. Maybe only one holds it down, right? But instead, you're creating a situation where you're doing nothing other than looking for an excuse for an escalation. And it was so bizarre what I saw happen. And to find out it was over weed,
yeah, since when did they respond to drug calls?
I'm sorry?
Since when did they respond to drug calls?
Oh, they do a lot, yeah.
I feel like I never see it, and like anytime I've ever seen one reported, they're like, oh, well, we've got other more important things to do.
Yeah, and so like, I mean, ultimately out of it, and this is also like, I saw yesterday, someone like robbed a bank truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the back of this car, and I'm watching cops and criminals slamming into each other, and it's just like, there was so many. And when I hear about the why, it was like, oh, they shot the locals in the back of the bank truck. And that's why we bring in a bunch of cops. And they're like, I'm also keep hearing like, well, we need I asked Cassidy yesterday, and he told me you need like 15 cops for a singular call. And in my mind,
like
I'm like, you only need that if you're willing to go to war in order to get someone into custody. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing if you're like doing like that big Hydra raid or something, for instance, where like you're going into like a turf or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe certain like higher stakes situations, maybe like a bank robbery or something. Maybe I don't know, but like, to just like respond to a weed sale, 15 is pretty
Yeah.
excessive, and then you have people who are getting taken hostage at 24/7s that aren't having cops show up because they're all elsewhere. It
Yeah.
just I feel like de-escalation and community policing are two skills that the PD and BCSO are lacking lately.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think mentality has shifted so much to something that's hard to explain, where I don't know. It's so I want to do something about it. I'm going to consider a decriminalization of marijuana. Maybe even transactions in small amounts.
Gee, if a fifth good sit 50 picks to get life for Dave Cocktail.
I feel like something drastic needs to be done, because without that, nothing makes. How am I supposed to interpret this? Like you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. In regards to marijuana, what are you hoping to change compared to what we have now, or like are planning to do, like as far as like dispensaries and stuff?
I think that doesn't really change too much. Maybe focus the police. Well, effectively, what we'd be doing is we'd be focusing the police through legislation into the production of these things. And effectively, if you're coming on duty to just shoot up people, that maybe that's not what you're getting paid to do.
100% agree.
I'm also contemplating
with
reducing LSPD pay as a consequence of what happened yesterday.
I don't know about that one.
Okay.
Especially if, like you said, it was a majority of BCSO officers, it feels a bit unfair to punish LSPD for something that was largely driven by another department.
My counter argument to this is, part of me believes that, without, over the last 3 months, there's been a lot of, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and I haven't seen anything get produced. And ultimately, the jurisdiction is in the hands of the LSPD. So unless resolution is made, right, which often doesn't happen, that is the biggest, simplest,
Wait, so this occurred within Los Santos County? I don't know where his mechanic shop actually is.
Oh, yeah, it's down in the south side. So
why are BCSO officers leading a scene in LSPD jurisdiction?
Welcome to the last 4 months, because there's no other way to put it other than the marshals, Angel, and BCSO want to operate down in the city without any rules and accountability. And as
I don't mind BCSO officers showing up to back them up, but if LSPD officers were present, then they should have lead of the
you're
scene.
asking common sense questions. The problem is that even when I brought up to Bones yesterday, this very point that we need to, I'm going to be passing legislation for over policing. So they cannot actively patrol, like traffic citations and stuff. They can attach the calls and shit, but they can't patrol the streets normally. He crashed out. He said, you just want to be like Max, which I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Max was a pretty decent guy. I don't know what he has to do with the PD to begin with. Number two, he said, you're going to ruin the PD. So that tells me this guy is exactly who I believe him to be, which is he wants a department that is the scuff troopers that can do whatever they can to chase adrenaline. This is not built on the principle of policing. It is built on the principle of some other shit, right? It's a gang. It's a gang mentality, right? Boost our numbers, find reasons to shoot, do not be considerate about where you live and what your job is. Now, that same mentality does also exist in the LSPD, but the fact of the matter is that it is 3 months and 2 weeks too late. And if the LSPD is not able to control their department, they're going to have to do it, because I'm done having. It's time for some dramatic change is where I'm going with this. Take your county under control, or I will take it for you.
I agree. I just still don't know if I think, like, especially I think with the extra information I've gotten, like, if BCSO came down, took over a scene that wasn't theirs and wasn't in their jurisdiction, I don't think lowering LSPD officers' pay in response is necessarily fair. But I do think that LSPD officers need to either be more confident or
it wasn't
be more
their
empowered,
scene,
or
by
maybe
the way.
Both.
It wasn't their scene. They started the scene. They were photographing down here. So that's the other thing, is that they operate down here. So what you may not know here, Maeve, is BCSO doesn't actually do anything up north. They're just down here as a different department.
I mean, I don't think there's much for them to do up north, to be honest. But then you also
plenty
have
of crimes
people
up north all the time that they just don't look into. There are constant moonshines and drug sales.
There's Polito that feels like it's getting ignored.
They're in the wrong department then, right?
Yeah. And they're also, you know, when BCSO was, like, being formed, they were supposed to be, like, highwaymen, but I don't see, you know, like, BCSO, like, parked waiting for traffic stops or anything if I go up the highway. Like,
you don't
there
join...
could be finding stuff to do, just because there's not, you know, like, I don't know, art galleries being robbed up north.
Yeah.
But, I mean, yes, there is less to do, but, like, it's a different job.
Yeah. You're saying too much common sense right now. Ajax, I'm in a meeting right now. I can call you afterwards, though.
Sounds good, sir.
All right, bye. Yeah, it's and to point out why I may end up reducing pay is, at the end of the day, it is a I need Daisy and Peters to, I feel like, without doing something drastic, I don't know. Maybe you're right. I think it needs to come down to, maybe this is like a last. I feel like if there was a consequence that affected the LSPD, they'd be more collectively vigilant that what is occurring in their city is their responsibility and not BCSO's, right? So down from a cadet on higher, that if they're witnessing a different department doing things that are outside of the wishes of the populace down here, then they will be directly affected, and therefore it would motivate them to bring it up and look for solutions. And I think if they don't, why would they care, right? It's not their problem. In fact, I want to extend this by saying that, in my opinion, I've also witnessed the current high command adhere to the jurisdictional stuff and then seemingly throw it away 2 weeks later, right? Because I keep thinking, for whatever reason in their mind, they keep getting abused, right? And then, like, someone like I'll give you a scenario, right? Apparently, high command talked to the sheriff, right? And over some shit. And they came to, like, some common understanding. Literally next day, BCSO is poaching LSPD officers. Now, I'm of the opinion that I don't really give a fuck where someone wants to get employed. You're getting employed to do a job, right? If you're employed to LSPD, that's your job is to secure Los Santos, right? If you're at BCSO employed, if they had this, all of a sudden Bones goes and poaches a bunch of people. He's been talking about this UPD bullshit, but he understands how damaging it is to LSPD. So they're doing such snaky shit that I fucking chewed that bitch out. Bones.
Oh, good.
And all he said was some dumb shit, to be honest. I don't think, same level as Cassidy. These guys, they just want to, you know, fucking adrenaline rush everything, right? They don't understand adult conversations.
Yeah.
So guy goes off, right? But my whole point of that is, like, how many times, and this is to like Peters and Daisy, are they gonna keep playing nice and think just because they say they're changing and they can fuck you in the ass again, that you're gonna do something about it, right? Ultimately, at a certain point, they're not doing their job as high command.
Yeah.
Right.
If I may put my 2 cents in on this,
Of course.
this has basically been going on since our first term started, since Moss and Peters got in there. Straight up, they're too soft. They need to be putting their foot down and putting the hammer down, and they're not doing it. They're trying to be nice and help people's feelings, but that's not the way to run a police department. And honestly, it's kind of pissing me off. So I'm all for going ahead and holding the police more accountable and making something happen. I would like to find something that isn't going to immediately drive the optics against us, but at the same time, desperate times do call for desperate measures.
And I don't give a fuck about optics, to be honest.
Yeah. All right.
I have a crazy idea. So generally speaking, well, you know, obviously if someone really fucks up, a talking to or punishment or whatever, like, might be necessary. I'm generally a fan of empowering people, coaching them, building them up, rather than disciplinary action when possible and appropriate, obviously.
Agreed.
I think maybe instead of just
By
saying,
the way,
like,
we're
you
not
guys
getting
aren't
rid of
doing
Daisy
enough,
and Peters.
So, you know,
This is
fuck
just
you, we're
Nino
lowering
being
your pay,
pissed.
and when you learn to get better, maybe you'll get that back. What if we re-implemented something like Max's quota system?
No, hell
Where-
no. No.
Okay, hear me out. It doesn't have to be exactly like that, but it's something where when good things happen, they are rewarded. It doesn't have to be that system per se, but can we find something that motivates them to do those things and reinforces those positive behaviors?
It's because, and Maeve, I see where you're going with this, and I like the principle of it, but the issue is, I think what Archibald is saying is that Daisy and Moss have moments of, if I'm going to be honest here, is Daisy has moments where she bosses, and then as soon as someone's like, I'm sorry, she becomes sweet again. And until she gets hit in the back of the head. And then she's surprised. Right? And this is not a one-time thing. This is like a consistent thing.
It's happening
Peters
over and over.
gets mad and he does the most extreme shit. That he, instead of...
He overcorrects.
He so heavily overcorrects, he starts looking for blood, right? Which not only, while it's like a doctor that's removing a problem, right? Like someone's got like an illness, and instead of cutting away the problem, they cut the entire like fucking limb off. You know what I mean? And so, you know, now everyone has their positives and minuses, right? And I do recognize that, keep in mind that Daisy and Peters have been consistently beaten up over and over again. Half of it, which is their own fault, right? By not holding firm and protecting what they're responsible for, right? But understandably, they also get constantly investigated, have been dealing with bullshit. But part of me is also like, I did tell them 3 months ago, fire everybody that does not adhere to you and grow the department. Instead, they keep saying these people will change. They will get better.
Yeah.
And now all you got left is you still got these. You gotta, you don't restructure a company and say, hey, you know what? Let's keep all the failing employees. You know what I mean?
It feels like they're not learning from the Scorpion and Ox proverb. It's they keep letting these people back when they know their nature at this point, because they've done it over and over. They've been doing it. Bones and Cassie have been snaking people from the department since they fucking got in office.
Yes, exactly.
It's one thing to give people an opportunity to change, but if it's been going on for far too long and they still haven't changed, then it's time.
Yeah, I agree. Now I will say I'm gonna give them some latitude, given the most. They've been dealing with a lot of bullshit. Literally, finally, marshals have stopped showing up at this thing. And I generally believe that what they need to do is get rid of anybody else that they think is an issue and start hiring people and empowering people from like Forte to like decent folks in there and getting them trained and slow everything the fuck down. Right? And if they can't, well, then we move on to the next step.
I'm genuinely curious at this point how many good people have applied for LSPD that have slipped through the cracks, who are still on the application list waiting or on pass lists that got thrown out, because I feel like there's probably a lot of people that could have been brought in to help make things fit this vision better, and just it just hasn't been happening. Well, and part of that is understaffing. They don't have FTOs, and you know, like there's only so much they can do. But I don't know, it gives me pause sometimes.
Apparently a lot of the people that have been in charge of training have been BCSO members or very heavy sympathizers with them anyway, so that's not helping.
I mean, fuck, I was on the PD applicant list for 4 months and I still like never got, like, Forte even brought me up to Maxwell, and Maxwell has a million and one things, so I don't blame her, but she was like, I'll contact her later, and never did. And like, you know, I wonder how many people, and like I was a dispatcher too, so like I was at least somewhat known. Like I wasn't like a total you know, nobody like that no one's ever heard of before. But it just makes me wonder how many good people are being let slip away that could actually be helping, and if they had more of a drive on recruitment and hiring, where they could be.
I think
it would help if they weren't having to deal with so many issues at one time. I do highly respect Moss and Peters for what they've been able to do with what they have. I just want their attitude to change a little bit.
That's exactly it. It for me gets exhausting because they keep resetting every 2 weeks, right? 1 minute they're red, 1 minute they're green, and it's like they need to keep that energy, right? Otherwise, it's giving me a fucking headache. As a consequence.
I think on a grander scale, that's been the problem with the PD since, you know, we started rebuilding after Sanguine. Like, you started with the 3 captains, and they were, you know, fairly serious, fairly strict for the most part, right? And, you know, cops started complaining, and there was the apocalypse that happened, and like, then, you know, things started loosening up a bit towards the end of the Thoroughbreds term, and, you know, like, then shit started getting serious again with Barrick and Ruby and everything. And, you know, the marshals came in and started witch hunting everyone. And then Moss and Peters came in and, like, morale was up good. But we have all this drama with BCSO. And it's like everything just overcorrects every single time, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And when that happens every 1, 2, 3 months, the officers have no consistency and can't truly flourish.
Yeah, a lot of that lack of consistency comes from their own infighting, though. I mean, I don't get why cops can't just shut up and do their fucking job.
Well, it's because they're chasing adrenaline is the problem. Every single thing I've dealt with before I was the mayor to afterwards is that this is the worst iteration of the police department I've ever seen in my fucking life, where the forefront of their mind is bigger guns, faster cars, etc., in order to do their job, quote unquote, where they do not perceive it as serving and protecting, but rather shooting criminals and throwing them away for as long as they can. And also, when you have that cultural mentality, you only recruit people that would have otherwise been in notorious gangs.
Fair. And mate, sorry, I hope I don't sound like I'm being dismissive when you're bringing up stuff.
No,
I'm very jaded on this subject, honestly.
No, I'm a grown adult fully capable of having conversations in which we may disagree with one another. That's okay.
It's a nice relief. We don't get that too often in the city. So.
If I'm upset with you, I will tell you so.
Fair enough. Appreciate that.
You know, and that's the beauty here. You know, Maeve, you bring a lot of new perspective in too. You know what I mean? Because we are on some of these topics very jaded. But
yeah, and I apologize too if you feel like I'm speaking down to you or anything, please. Or if I bring up something that you've already considered 2 months ago, you know, I just don't know because I wasn't here. Like, it's not that I think you're stupid or anything, you know.
No, I prefer the blunt conversation. I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page. That was all.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, what prompted this though? I kind of missed the meeting, so I assume something happened.
I was in I honestly, like, a number of things where I've realized that from the onset of becoming mayor, right? we had a drive to bring a level of sanity back to San Andreas in the midst of PD gang and gangs, right? And some semblance of like that not everything needs to be kill or not kill, right? 1,000,000 years or 0 years, right? Where civilians can have an opportunity to recuperate, but you don't have like a guy running a food stall having to spend 2 months with a felony on his record because he tried to protect himself, right? And I think yesterday what happened was LSPD lost 4 officers that should have been gone a long time ago, quite frankly. 2 of which I personally listened for 2 months, the shit talking in the back, stabbing their own high command in the back, etc., etc. But just to be nice, they were kept around. That's called a cancer. No organization in the United States maintains people that create a toxic environment. An environment where instead of following the leader, you're working against them or acting as a roadblock. Because what that does is no matter what, every leader that you put in place is going to have their own vision, right? Some are going to be more this way. Some are going to be more that way. At the end of the day, whatever the leader says, you follow it. Otherwise, instead of you end up something half-baked. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you're making an apple pie, you're making an apple pie. If you're making a fucking pumpkin pie, you're making a pumpkin pie. But if all the people making that fucking pie are like working on something else, you end up with some dog shit that's burnt in the oven. Right?
It should be like most government and corporate groups in that, like, if you have a dispute, you take it in private. In public facing, you should be a united front.
Precisely.
Praise in public, criticize in private.
Yes. And this is all, it's a very, there's a mandate. You follow the mandate. You're either in or you're out. Right? And so, they transfer, and this is at the helm of, I'm being told, like, oh, things have gotten better, and then all of a sudden they get stabbed in the back. And I'm just like, bro, this is like, what? How many fucking times am I going to hear this story? Right? And then what happened that evening was I witnessed, because we were already talking about, like, over-policing, where there's, like, fucking a bajillion cops going to small things and not understanding that, you know, they're using the excuse of, oh, my God, but there's a tuna cost, so we need more. Oh my God, but there's this and that. And it's like, bro, if a 24/7 is turning into the shit, you're fucking stupid, right? Like, there's no rationale where the mayor's going to be like, hey, or the people are going to be like, hey, someone stole like a fucking Slurpee from the 24/7, but they have 6 tuna cars, so therefore we're justified to invest fucking 15 cop cars and 20 police to chase these people down. It doesn't make any sense anymore, right?
Yeah.
So I witnessed Finley.
Well, it's also sort of an arms race.
That's exactly what it is.
Because if like, I mean, I remember when, you know, cops only had CVPIs and were down horrendous. Like, but like, if a criminal gets a tuner car and so cops get new interceptors, well, then the criminal's going to start looking for something else that gives him an edge over the cop, and then the cop's going to need something else that gives him an edge over the criminal, and then they just keep escalating.
Yep. That is exactly it. That is precisely it.
And then they're never happy with what they have, and they're always looking for the next best thing. It's like an addict with the high. Like when you get that first high, and all those good chemicals leave your brain, and you spend forever chasing that again and again and again and again, and you escalate to harder substances. Like that's literally what's happening. It's just with cars and guns.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say for the PD at least, some of that could be rectified with a little bit more training, but that's a hard ask, I understand, given people's schedules and whatnot. And even then, that wouldn't completely shift it.
Well, it becomes like a mentality thing too, right? You know what? I'll give you a example of how it doesn't matter to me why this is like a bigger problem. It's not LSPD BCSO, it's fucking COPE, right? Because I remember practicing law, and Mr. K, who was a realtor, and he started his business in the same neighborhood I got my house in. He bought a property, he bought a bunch of others. Now, do I know he was up to probably some notorious shit? Absolutely. But this guy had a vision to start real estate. And there was even cops living in his house. One day, he is at fucking, what is a repair shop called? Mosley's?
Mosley's?
Yeah.
He is shot. His shooters are still there. He's just on negative. And they let the shooters go. Do not look into him. Into them. And turn him into a felon. And that mentality still exists today. Where, and I'm gonna show you how this relates, right? Every single court case I have been a part of over the last 9 months, either in bench trial or whatever, has come down to officers not even able to explain how they reach probable cause for the most minor crime. And what I'm pointing at here is that if you cannot do that, it's not surprising what happened to Mr. K, what happened down at ADMC, why some of these conversations don't get anywhere is because critical thinking has disappeared from law enforcement and the need to teach critical thinking. Because if you cannot critically think, you cannot assess a circumstance as it gets presented to you and react to it appropriately. You cannot, if you cannot critically think, you cannot see that, hey, this is a gang territory. I only know how to turn it into a shootout. If you cannot critically think, you end up going to court with the most bullshit fucking, like, you know, cases. And the only way to resolve that is probably by putting people in place that probably are not hired at this present time, if I'm going to be honest.
I'm going to say the dreaded word. Robocops.
Yep.
They're becoming complacent. They're becoming used to routine. They're saying, well, X happens, so Y happens, and Z happens, and I go through this routine of, you know, meet the criminal, raise the gun, have the shootout, do the chase, blah, 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 blah. Like, rinse, repeat. And there needs to be, like you said, more critical thinking, more empathy, more humanity of, why is this person robbing the store? Can we de-escalate them in any way? Blah, 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 blah. And actually go through those steps rather than just, this is how we expect things to happen, so this is how we're going to railroad things into them going.
Yes. And you can't sit here giving me a sob story about, oh, but they shot me, when you've put them into the populace into that position.
Hey, back a rat in a corner, it's gonna attack if it can't get away.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not to make me realize how much I dread the fucking marshals. Fucking day after a bunch of gangs decide that they're gonna hold back and stop their little war, they fucking bring out the tanks. Like, talk about fucking, like, Jesus. Maybe everything does need to get burned to the ground.
Well, speaking of that, did you see the contest Michael put up?
For the FOIA and the
for
marshals?
The marshals, and I helped do some of the research for it, and I realized that the definitions of law enforcement legislation went hand in hand with that, so we worked on contesting both of them.
Oh, let's go.
Hell
okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to review that today, and when there is a judge around, I say we send it. And I think I want to start focusing on reshaping things through lawyers and legislation instead of relying on the people, be it the PDs, to, if the legislation changes it puts the appropriate fences up. If the appropriate fences are up and they cross that fence, then the lawyers can keep them accountable.
I mean, if we're already looking at restructuring, legislation and, contesting things and looking at the penal code and all these things already, I mean, I think now's as good a time as any to look at, what we can do to, rebuild the PD, even if that means knocking some of it down a bit. Like, if we need to tear some walls down or to build, like, a good foundation.
I think the challenge of that we're facing is that there's not much of... I still think Daisy is the best person in the position for chief of police. Because
I don't have an issue with Daisy or Peters.
She has a fantastic sense. She has common sense. I was about to say fantastic. I don't even think Daisy's common sense is like even extraordinary, and I'm not trying to downplay her, but no, rather I'm pointing at the lack of common sense in offices, right? She can see a situation for what it is as to what... She doesn't reinterpret what's in front of her to fit her agenda.
Mm-hmm. I guess what I'm saying is if we're going to be making drastic sweeping changes to how our government is functioning or how things are regulated and legislated and legalized or criminalized, like, we might as well take a look at the PD while we're at it and just get it all done at once.
The only thing is the PD, we want to be doing it through like Daisy and Peters.
Yes.
And I don't know what we can particularly do outside of, digging up the grave of like, a fallen soldier and bringing him back to life and having them fix it all. You know what I mean? Like, there are no options that... Well, could you explain what you mean by that, Maeve? Maybe I'm thinking one thing and you mean another.
I'm not saying we need to, necessarily, legislate anything or, but, maybe, have chats with Moss and Peters about what we would like to see from the PD. And, I'm not trying to override their autonomy or anything, but, or their authority, but, if we want to focus on community policing or de-escalation or whatever it may be, we can communicate with them. We can encourage them to host, training seminars or academies or whatever, give them the resources that they need to do that if they need resources, and support them in those endeavors and say, hey, we'd like the PD to be functioning, in this way or be doing better at this. We're noticing these gaps. How can we support you in making this happen? We have this standard for the PD that we feel isn't being met. We'd like to communicate to you that we feel it isn't being met. We'd like to hear your thoughts on the matter, and let's try and work out a solution for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. I think that's...
Because we can sit here in a circle after briefing every day and bitch about the PD all that we want, but if we're not communicating things to them about how we feel standards aren't being met or coming to them with solutions or even just extending an olive branch on how to fix it, then it's not really going to get much of anywhere. And I mean, yeah, we can decriminalize marijuana and, put in open carry and whatever, but at the end of the day, the cops are still going to be behaving the same. So is it really all that different?
That's a good point. Yeah.
We have to go to the root of the problem and be willing to work with them. And I think now is as good a time as any to do that while we're in this big period of change.
Agreed.
Mold things into what we want them to be, and that will hopefully be functional going forward.
How do we organize something like that in your mind?
I mean, I guess first things first, you and us as your cabinet need to decide what is important for us to see from the PD so that we have a vision and standards that we can present. We have a meeting with Moss, Peters, any other command members that they want to bring, whatever. And, we say, hey, here's what we're noticing. Why are we struggling to meet this? Can you meet this, etc. And go from there.
You know what? I agree with that. And I'm going to want to go as far as saying that I think we should have a written down mandate of expectations and keep it simple. And that was originally something we wanted to do, but then things got in the way. And instead of verbalizing it in conversation, it comes out on paper.
I'm a big fan of written communication because you can always reference it back.
Thank you so much. See, this is why we like you, Maeve. You know what I mean? Like, another common sense. I've only been offending people apparently by asking for things to be written down. Is that crazy? Right? Either I ask for something written or that I imply I'll write something down, and there's immediate offense. Like, I don't understand that. Like, I can only think, like, did this motherfucker get hired for, like, Stop and Shop or Big D or whatever supermarket, bagging groceries? Because, like, it's the most common practice. Like, I
mean, I think it's common sense that if I come to you and I say, hey, I have 10 expectations, you're probably going to forget one, or maybe the particulars of one.
Or misunderstand what you're saying.
Yeah. Having it written down so that you can go back and be like, what did he want for this thing again? And then, you have it right there.
I think it's a combination of a couple of things. Number one, some people don't like being held accountable for what they said in the past, and so they don't want shit written down because of that. And then other people have just, to put it oddly, never had a job outside of, like, the PD or certain other structures in this city, and so they just don't get it.
Yeah, There's a third option. They know what it is, and they are pre-complaining, knowing where it's about to go. Right?
Also, yeah.
So,
maliciousness is
like baby raging, you know what I mean? Like, just, where? I want to shoot the criminals. Where?
I'm not going to read anything, but I want to complain about it immediately.
Yeah. Okay. All right. This is good. I'm gonna take a look at the stuff that's been cooked up, and let's reconvene on this topic tomorrow with Michael around. Plus, it'll allow me some time to have a chat with Finley and company. Also, let my feelings simmer down on this, especially with the big legislation pushes we're considering, which is, do we want to consider decriminalization of marijuana and provide some semblance of, like, is there something we can legislate that may make it more difficult for law enforcement to over-escalate just because they happen to see a gun? That second one might be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, I am a staunch anti-prohibitionist, so I can talk to the medical representative at some point and try to hash out a way to get the marijuana stuff to work, because obviously they got to classify it differently if we're going to actually
I think that's such a good one, too, because it's illegal to produce, but it's legal, like, without a license.
To have.
But it's legal to just do small exchanges. Right, that's gonna piss off a lot of cops, but I don't really give a fuck. If that means it's massive de-escalation across the board, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
I don't think marijuana is really something worth going to war over, to be honest.
It's
very different than other drugs, and as far as it's dangers to the community. Like I just don't think it's worth the bloodshed.
Agreed. It might, to counter this.
I mean, maybe it's the Irish in me, but I don't think moonshine should be illegal either. But that's always been more
I'm
of a money
from North
thing.
Carolina. I feel the same way.
Yeah, let people have their poutine, man. I don't give a fuck.
Yep, agreed. All right.
Sorry, poutine is Irish for moonshine.
No, you're good. I'm also have some Irish heritage. I've heard many of these words.
All right.
Yeah, North Carolina. I mean, moonshine was only even introduced in the States because they learned it from Irish and Scottish settlers.
Oh, really?
And the founding of NASCAR actually came from people running shine in the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah, and there was I believe it was the barony of Inishowen, maybe. I might be wrong on barony. In Ireland, they did a raid once in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, I think it was. Half the people in their homes had a private still where they were making their own poutine. And Irish whiskey as a whole came from the fact that we were trying to evade taxes on malt by the English, so we started using unmalted grains in our whiskey making, and that's why you have the Irish whiskey style being as distinct and smooth as it is.
All right. Oh yeah. All right. I'm gonna get going. Maeve.
Sorry, that was a lot of autistic info dumping.
No. This has been great. I just I realized we've been here a minute, so All right.
I'm sure you got other shit you need to do.
Absolutely. We'll reconvene tomorrow. I like these meetups right after the PD. I think
I do too.
it right in the middle of the day, etc., and please do see if you could set up a meeting with Daisy to let her know about the site stuff.
Do you know if she's around today?
She may be.
She wasn't at the briefing.
She is more around during the weekend, so she might be around later this evening. I would let me give you her phone number, and
yeah, perfect.
I would keep trying until you reach her. All right, there you go. There's the number.
Do either of you have the new medical director's number or like an assistant of hers I could reach out to?
I got you.
Awesome.
And there you go. It's Dr. Naya in Nashville.
Okay, I'll get that down. Thank you.
I
will get in touch with him sometime in the near future.
All right, fantastic. All right, y'all. Y'all take care, yeah?
Yeah, let me know if you need anything.
Will do.